Okay, so here's a basic introduction to IV drip rates. Go fairly quick through this. I just want to give you an idea of what we've been talking about in terms of quick and easy calculations on IV drip rates. Your basic problem: you need to deliver IV fluids at a certain rate, and that rate's usually ordered in cc's per hour. How do you get that into drops per minute? Because that's what we really need to work with. So your orders may call for 100 cc an hour IV drip during the transport, or maybe you're supposed to give a liter an hour to someone with dehydration. Again, both fairly common problems for you out there. Basic rule of thumb is whatever the ordered rate is in cc's per hour is also the number of micro drips per minute. The number of drops per minute with a 60 drop set is going to be the same as what's ordered. Then if you're not using a 60 drop set, then we'll show you how to change that number using your factor based on what size macro drip set you're using. Basic math involves a couple of key facts. There's 60 minutes in an hour. There's also 60 drops from that micro drip set, which makes the calculation pretty clean. Your IV is going to be ordered at a question mark number of cc's per hour. The question mark shows up in the formula we show you here in just a second. We want that answer to be in drops per minute. So, as with any of these calculations, if you line up the units correctly, then you can just fill in the numbers. If you can't remember the formula, you can always just line up units, and that helps you cancel things out and get the calculation in the correct units that you want. So, if we got 60 drops per cc for your micro set, there's an hour is worth 60 minutes, and then we're going to get some order in question mark number cc's per hour, and we want our answer to come out in drops per minute. And what you'll see is that whatever that number is in cc's per hour is also going to be the same number of drops per minute. Here you've got 100 cc per hour order, and you're going to come up with 100 drops per minute. Matter of fact, whatever bizarre number we throw in there, whether it's 273 or whatever other number, that's going to be your drops per minute. But what about a macro set? We use the same rule of thumb, but you've got to adjust it by a factor. And that factor depends on what size macro set you're using. Different services use different sizes. You pretty much learn the factor for your service and then always use that number. If you're using a 10 drop set, the factor is going to be a 6. I'll show you what factor means here in a second. If it's a 15 drop set, then your factor is 4, and 20 drop set, your factor is 3. So if you get an order to run an IV at 120 an hour, if you're using a micro drip set, well, then the drops per minute is 120 drops per minute. But if you're using a macro drip, and you have to adjust that 120 by your factor. So if the infusion is ordered at 120 cc's an hour, if you have a 60 drop set, it is 120 drops a minute. If you're using a 10 drop set, then your factor is 6, so it's 120 divided by 6, or 20 drops a minute. If you're using a 15 drop set, your factor is 4, so now it's at 30 drops a minute, which makes sense because those drops are smaller. With a 20 drop set, again, the factor is 3, because that's 60 divided by 20. And so you want it to do this except once per IV. You just know what your factor is, and you make the quick division. So let's try these problems real quick. If the order is for 1,000 an hour, a liter an hour, if you got a 60 drop set, well, your rate's 1,000. If you got a 20 drop set, what's the rate? And you can pause the video and think about it on your own if you'd like. I'll give you a couple of seconds here. The factor would be 3. So now your 1,000 is divided by 3, or 333 drops a minute. That's 5 drops a second. It's almost wide open, even with a 20 drop set. Again, try this one. If the infusion is 1,000 an hour and you've got a 60, well, we know it's going to be 1,000 micro drops per minute. But if it's a 10 drop set, what's the rate? Well, what would your factor be? Your factor would be 6. So now the rate's 167. So that's between 2 and 3 drops a second. Certainly a more reasonable rate to try to count. So you may want to stop here. This is the basic one. When we go back through in basic drip rates 2, we'll start talking about a couple of drips, and that may cause you a little bit of stress. But this is the basic IV drip rate presentation.